Our research question was, to what extent does financial background influence degree choice in college students? I'm Ellie.
I'm Vicky.
I'm Aaron.
I'm Julia.
I'm Michael.
Okay, we kind of give you a preview of our presentation. We're going to start with the introduction, which is going to have some statistics in it. We'll move into our literature review, which will contain our research goal and our research. And then we'll move into our hypothesis, which will contain our independent and dependent variables. Then we'll move on to the survey plan and sample plan, which has our task breakdown and our sample method. And then we'll move on to our data results, where we'll break down data using different tests, and we'll end with our conclusion. To kind of start, raise of hands, how many of you guys considered your potential earning salary when you chose your degree? Okay, that kind of matches a statistic that says that only 50% of students consider their earnings when deciding their degree. It also supports a statistic that shows that students that come from wealthier families are more likely to pursue a degree in a higher paying field, while students that come from lower income families face barriers that prevent them from doing so. Overall, leading our financial background to possibly affect our degree choices.
So what is the big deal? Why would we choose this topic? We believe that it is highly relevant to everybody in the classroom and within our group. That's why we went with it. And to kind of get the ball rolling on how financial background might influence our college and higher education experiences, I'll pose a question to y'all. And that is that if you had a fully funded scholarship to pursue any degree that you wanted, what would it be? And just kind of think to yourselves. Personally, I think I'd be rolling around in the mud with STEM majors myself, and I just think that goes to show that, you know, it does definitely have an influence, and how much of an influence it has is why we are here today. To back up some of our preliminary research, checked out Kim Whedon's research. She's a psychologist from Cornell University. In 2015, she conducted a study on 12,000 students in the United States, and basically traced the relationship between their household income and their degree choice. And then Big Starts wrote a paper describing the relationship between the Pell recipients and their post-grad earnings. Found that it was 11% less than their peers. If you're not familiar with what Pell Grant is, it's a federally funded program that targets lower income household students. And that kind of, this graph shows how it's distributed throughout the years. And then going further off of that, we found that degrees where Pell Grant students were more highly concentrated in had a lower average earnings post-grad. So why is that? There's a lot of factors that could be at play. But checking out this graph, it's clear that there is a distinct relationship. As you go further up the x-axis, you have a higher concentration of Pell recipients within the chosen degree, and then obviously average earnings is a negative correlation. Now, when we were doing our research on, before we began our own, found that there was a lack of qualitative inspection on various factors. There was a lot of analysis based on, you know, two variables and just kind of making conclusions based off of that, which is definitely great. It's helpful to us to have some background info, but we wanted to dive into some more specific factors that weren't quite covered. And our goal at the end of the day here is to, if there are any gaps in access to higher education based on financial background, hopefully we can identify those and then go forward to implement a plan to reduce those gaps.
So moving on to our hypothesis, our first hypothesis stated the student's financial background significantly influences their choice of college degree. Our independent variable was financial background, which includes factors like family income, access to financial aid, and socioeconomic status. And our dependent variable is choice of college degree. So many students from a high income background may have more freedom to pursue degrees based on personal interest, even if it doesn't immediately lead to a high paying job. Whereas students from low income backgrounds may have to prioritize degrees that promise job security and financial stability. Our second hypothesis stated future expected income will impact degree choice. Our independent variable is future expected income, and our dependent variable is again choice of college degree. So many students consider earning potential when choosing their degree, and they sometimes prioritize financial stability over personal passions. So majors like engineering, computer science, or even finance and business attract students seeking more of a strong financial return, whereas majors in arts and humanities may see lower enrollment due to income concerns.
For our survey objectives, we had 3 different research objectives. Firstly, we want to determine the extent to which financial background influences a person's degree choice. Secondly, we wanted to identify if there was any disparities between participants in their academic and career opportunities. And then we wanted to understand how our data can be interpreted and applied for the future of our participants. We will conduct our survey online through social media. So we've conducted our survey online through Snapchat, Instagram, and all other sorts of social medias. Then using multiple choice questions and Likert questions, we had data that was varied and easy to analyze. And then using quick links and QR codes, we were able to facilitate our survey fast and easily. We did this through a 5-week period, and our first week we started with 10 people and then broke it down so that we could better our questions and see what feedback we needed to use. Then in our second to third week, we shared the final launch of our survey, then monitored for responses, and then in our 4th and 5th weeks, we organized, cleaned the data, and then tried to interpret what we could from that data.
Alright, so moving on to our sample plan and our target population. Our age range for this was 17 to 27-year-olds. So that was current students and recent college graduates. And then we were targeting NMU students, but it wasn't limited to NMU. We wanted to get different locations, more responses. Our goal was 150 responses, but the more the better. And then we used 2 different sample methods. The first one being convenient sampling, which we used the most. That was to get the people at NMU, our roommates, our teammates, our classmates, and then we also used chain referral sampling. We used that one to get the students that aren't here at NMU. We asked our family and our friends to take it, and then also to ask their family and friends as well. So then we did some descriptive interpretation. We found the most important demographics that we collected were that 96% of our respondents were 17 to 27-year-olds, and there were more upperclassmen. So about 51% seniors, 22% juniors. And that makes sense because the further you are in your education, the more you're seriously thinking about careers, financial goals, things like that. And then 49% of our respondents are or were enrolled in the College of Business, which also makes sense because this field is kind of associated with strong job prospects and higher earning potential. And then 64% came from middle income families, 30% from upper income, and it was about 5% for lower income families. Then also 64% are or were working well in school, so they were balancing financial responsibilities as well as school. So then moving on, we found some behaviors and attitudes within this. The survey revealed some clear connections between students' behaviors as well as their financial pressures and degree choices. So first, again, 64% of students reported working well in college. So this shows that they were supporting themselves, which may lead to them choosing majors that are likely to pay really quickly. And then also students coming from low to middle income families are often choosing fields that lead directly to jobs. There was also a big difference in how much financial help students were getting from their families. So on average, families covered about 49% of financial and expense support there, but there was a lot of variation. Some were getting strong financial support, while some were relying on financial aid, loans, jobs, and things like that. So after looking at the behaviors and attitudes, we kind of thought about some future predictions in this. And with nearly half of our respondents graduating with debt and over a third receiving financial aid, degrees that offer stronger earning potential are likely to stay super popular. So business, technology, engineering, they're just gonna rise in popularity. And then again, the fact that 64% of current students are working while studying, it also means that flexibility will be a huge priority. People might start taking evening classes as well as online classes, or even internship-based programs. And then lastly, as college cost rises, vocational and skill-based training might become more appealing, especially for the lower income families, so that they can, or the lower income students, so they can just quickly enter into the workforce.
So what makes our methods better? We used multiple data analysis methods so that we could better analyze and understand our data. First, we used one-way ANOVA data analysis so that we can compare multiple variables into one sample. Then we used chi-squared analysis so that we could compare two variables in our sample, and then we used multiple regression predictions so that we can predict future and current trends.
Now into some more of the nitty gritty. Our first research question, like Vivian said, was how does financial background influence degree choice? And we ran a one-way ANOVA test to describe this relationship. It compared the relationship between low and middle and upper income households, and then the extent to which finances influenced their degree choice. Now it's worth mentioning we did not get significant value, but the graph here does show a bit of a trend, so we thought it was worth mentioning. And we also ran chi-squared to answer this question, and that compared students with and without student loans here on the x-axis to the number of students that considered or did change their major due to financial concerns. Our result was that students with loans are significantly more likely to consider or change their major.
For our second research objective, we wanted to determine the disparities in academic and career opportunities. So we used an ANOVA test to try to compare the financial support one receives from their family to the financial support that they receive from the school. And we found that there wasn't really much of a correlation, but this could tell us that the school's actually doing a semi-alright job at trying to keep everyone supported and helped throughout their time going through college. For our third research objective, we used a multiple regression model so that we could see if the financial factors could predict a person's degree choice. And we found that while it wasn't significant, it could tell us that there is a slight trend that shows that people who are going into college always consider their financial considerations.
So moving on to our hypothesis testing results. Again, our first hypothesis stated a student's financial background significantly influences their choice of college degree. So we found a semi-notable relationship between family income and perceived financial influence. We found students with loans are more likely to consider to change their major. And lastly, we found financial factors can predict degree and career decisions, showing that finances are more than just a background concern. So overall, this data shows that financial background is an influence on a student's college degree choice. Our second hypothesis was future expected income will impact degree choice. We found a relationship between expected earnings and degree or career decisions. We also found that financial incentives were strong predictors of degree selection and career pathways, and this shows that many students are considering future income potential when choosing their degree.
In conclusion, although we lacked a small amount of data and we changed a lot of different parts of our process, we found both of our hypotheses to be correct and supported. And in the future, we want our data to benefit future generations with how they pay for college and decide on a degree. Overall, we want higher education to become more inclusive and accepting.